Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming in this exceptionally hot day. This is the last panel, educational panel of this event, and I'm very proud to announce finally a panel which is going to be dedicated to youth. So the topics are versatile, so we're going to talk about activism, but also culture, arts, and engagement of youth in general. Without further ado, I would like to, before we start, I wanted to ask Esther to tell you the fantastic tour which we're going to have after this panel, or after lunch, right? So can you just tell us also that we don't forget, that we know what is happening next? Thank you, Esther. Thank you so much, Esther. And now we can dedicate ourselves to the panel. First of all, I wanted to say that Jody Jensen is really the idea maker of this whole initiative of iASK to work on a book about youth and politics, and this panel also needs to reflect on that. But we decided to make it more broader. And we're going to have a very wonderful, diverse group of speakers. And so I just want to quickly introduce everybody, and then we will start with this order. So Igor Stipić is our iASK fellow, who has been reoccurringly a fellow, also a co-author of the book. And he's also doing a PhD at University of Regensburg and iOS Leibniz Institute. He got a scholarship. Then we have the director of Eurothink-Center for European Strategies in North Macedonia, Dimitar Nikolovski. Then we have Dženita Šiljak from Sarajevo School of Science and Technology, Bosnia and Herzegovina, but she's also our associate fellow at iASK. Then we have Péter Balogh, who is a senior youth delegate of Hungary to the United Nations. Thank you so much also for coming and joining us. And then Erina Troka from Institute for Policy and Law. Let's start with this order. So I would give the floor first to Igor Stipić from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Who won last night the game and managed to get further in the World Cup. That's also big news.
Okay. Jel ja mijenjam ove slajdove s ovim?
Tako je, samo ako ne ide na napred, probaj nazad, meni je to radi.
Okay, super, hvala ti. Okay, so I hope you can hear me. As you can see, the topic of my presentation is youth political engagement and democratic futures in Southeast Europe. Today I will bring you two case studies that I have done in the last year, one from Montenegro and one from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So maybe I have to wait. Here it is. Things are happening. Okay, So maybe just first of all to tell you who I am. So I'm social anthropologist, ethnographer, and I also worked in high schools over the period of 3 years as ethnographer and high school teacher. And I have background in master degrees in political science and sociology, but I decided to become an anthropologist after I spent 5 or 6 years here at iASK. My field focus is youth political studies in general, but I always approach this question from the perspective of educational and political anthropology. So I conducted my PhD fieldwork in Santiago de Chile during 2022. I did ethnography of very politicized public high school with a huge history of radical protest movements, and I hope that this comes out as a monograph let's say in 1 or 1.5 years. Let's see. I hope. So the second important moment for my engagement with youth political studies is the events that happened in Jajce in Bosnia and Herzegovina during 2017 when I was working here at iASK, and during my very beginnings we had a high school rebellion in this small town in central Bosnia that was directed against segregated ethno-national education in the country. So it was the only case during the 30 years of independent Bosnia and Herzegovina where teenagers rebelled against the system of education which puts them into different curricula depending on whether they belong to Serb, Croat or Bosniak ethnicity. So that's why when put into perspective the rebellion is very important. I conducted research during 2017 there, and I came back during 2023 and I basically conducted ethnography and I worked at this high school where I studied the afterlife of revolution, so to say. So this is basically the precedents that I can mention, and I hope now I get the next slide, or I have to, okay, here it is. So at the moment I'm also very happy to work at iASK book project, which has as its working title Youth and Politics in Southeast Europe. I think the topic is very close and very dear to me given the things that I have been working on over the past 10 years. In terms of youth and politics in Southeast Europe, I can talk about 2 protests. One comes from Montenegro and one comes from Sarajevo. This is 2025, this is 2026. They are interesting because both of them are youth-led social movements. Different types of youth engaged, but basically they reflect kind of wider regional dynamics that come from Serbia, but also global dynamics that we see youth becoming more politically engaged all over the world. So my main interest when working with this youth who engage in protests. So I work with youth that is politically active. I actually do not work with youth that is not politically active, so this is very important to distinguish, right? So I try to understand their own process of political becoming within this Southeastern European actually existing democracies, which we know are not perfect democracies, they are not model democracies and so on, they are quite the opposite, but I try to understand how they themselves basically become citizens within this specific social political space that has its own particularities and that influence the way that people actually engage with political action. I apply theories of figured worlds and lived citizenship, which are both anthropological theories, one coming from educational anthropology, which basically deals with how people understand worlds inside of which they live, and the other one focused on lived citizenship, political anthropology from Egypt, basically, and that says that citizenship needs to be studied within specific space, and it needs to be seen how it is lived as a political category by specific people, right? So we cannot generalize citizenship, but we have to put it within a specific place, and this is basically how I approach the people I work with. When I have time and opportunity, I conduct ethnography, like all the anthropologists who can, and I did this in Sarajevo because I live there at the moment. I also do live story interview with people who engage in these protests, and I completed it both in Podgorica and Sarajevo because I try to understand the political development of these people over the course of years, right? I mean, life history, they are mostly 20 years old, so it's not huge life history, but still there's something that we can learn from this. Okay, so the first protest comes from Podgorica. From 2025, it lasted during January and February of this year. The cause for mobilization of students was mass shooting in the town of Cetinje on the 1st of January 2025, when a man roamed through the streets of this town for a duration of 5 to 6 hours, killing 13 people without significant police response. So it's just one of the tragedy that managed to bring people on the streets, and basically the whole of this action was led by 20 university students. They formed a group that was called Kamo Sutra, or in English, Where to Tomorrow. So basically the question of the future was already being asked, and they were joined by groups of dissatisfied citizens, which are many, right? So the demands were political accountability, right to freedom of expression and protest, national mental health care given the tragedy that happened at the time, and civic education as part of obligatory curriculum in high school. Figured rule of democratic state, just to be very short, given the time constraint of the presentation, can be presented as dark and tormented mountain, which basically gives this kind of not such a nice vibe to this lived experience of citizenship in Montenegro, as it was explained to me by the people I met. So the second protest it comes from Sarajevo. I hope now I will get the slide going. So as you can see, the normal lives is the typical thing people look for in the region, and this is basically dark and tormented mountain thingy. Okay, here it is. So the one from Sarajevo is from this year. It lasted from February to March of this 2026, and the cause for mobilization was tram accident that resulted in death of one university student and in a serious injury of one high school student. So the university student was basically, he died the very first day. The high school student stayed in a coma for about 1 month and had her leg amputated. The thing is that the system of public transportation is in bad shape, and there's actually, of course, demands for accountability. There was no real accountability in this event, just as there are no real accountability in any kind of other accidents that happen in Bosnia, and that unfortunately are too many. So what happened here, basically, which was very surprising, are the high school students. Because the high school students, they generally do not mobilize in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There is no tradition of high school protest. There is no tradition of high school political engagement. But this time, particularly because of the student who ended up in the hospital, 90% of the people who participated in the protests were high school students. And without these students, it would be impossible actually to deliver the message, to maintain mobilization. And at the point in time when they decided to retreat, the protest stopped. They were, of course, joined by different groups of people, but they formed the majority of the group. And their demands were political accountability, right to freedom of gathering and protest, judicial functioning, investment in public infrastructure, and a very funny demand that says end of partitocracy, which is difficult to implement, but it was put as a demand by the protests, so of course I as an anthropologist have to include it, right? So this is another thing that's also relevant to the whole of Southeast Europe, I think, in certain kind of way. The figured world of democratic state here is basically that we have a state that has no citizen. We don't have citizens who are willing to mobilize, who are willing to politically engage, and that's why the death or the tragedy that was that resulted here was basically the hope that may you become awakened by that which has put them to sleep, as the banner says over here. So basically it was the idea to actually create some kind of citizens and to create this kind of mobilized youth who would change everything and so on. I mean, I don't really have any great conclusions at this point because it's still too early. I have conducted interviews, I'm still processing the data and so on. But what we can speak about, and which is a general topic, I think, for all of Southeast Europe, but generally the world itself, is this idea of uncertain futures. So I think we live in a world that's changing dynamically. This is not only a reflection of what's happening in Southeast Europe or Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's also happening in Hungary, it's happening in the United States, and I think that young people are trying to position, obviously, themselves. And as the name of the group that organized protest in Montenegro says it, it's Kamo Sutra, which basically means, translated in English, where tomorrow. So where are we going tomorrow? What is the direction of tomorrow? And I think this is relevant for all definitely the region itself. And it's a big question because before we had this huge thing of immigration and so on. And now we have actually, I think, different dynamics, but maybe Dženita will say something more about this. I'm not so sure. So when I asked Luka, who is one of the founders of the group, why did I select this name? He said, you know what? At that point in time, the name seemed perfect to me. You know, I was asking myself, where are we going inside a state that has no future? You know, kamo sutra with this kind of destroyed democracy, kamo sutra with this kind of state, kamo sutra with this kind of young people, where should we go from this point on, and what can the youth expect from the future itself? The case from Bosnia and Herzegovina is not too different, or better say from Sarajevo, because I think it's much more reflective of Sarajevo than a country as a whole. It also reflects this idea that I think even in a worse sense, what happens when these events occur, they last, but then they disappear very quickly, right? This usually, what happens here, you have this effect of political disillusionment, of this idea that the protests mean nothing, and that it was really bad idea to get engaged in the protest because you get frustration and you don't get change. And many times this is what we seem to witness in these events. I hope that this, okay, here it is. So one of the groups that participated in Sarajevo protest, there were many groups, some of them were defined as political, others were defined as non-political, was Hoće li ta promjena? Which basically says, is the change finally coming? So is it, you know, so like it's asked in like a funny way because it's also kind of a joke. It also implies that the change is really not coming in the end. So when I asked, I hope that this, okay. So when I asked Kadira, who is 22 years from the University of Sarajevo and the member of the group, I asked her, why did you select this name? She told me the following. We decided to choose this name because everything else that we propose, like the change is coming or now is the moment for change, seemed unrealistic. I mean, we realized, what moment? Of course, it is not the moment. Neither is change coming, nor will it ever arrive. So we decided that it was the best to just ask people what they think and see if they have it in their plans that the change is coming to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they were playing it funny, and they actually stayed engaged over the period of 1.5 years in protest. So this protest was not their first experience. Okay. So what's important to have in mind that for both of these movements that I have studied, Serbian youth movement was a huge inspiration. If these things did not occur in Serbia, it's very unlikely that they would occur in Montenegro or in Bosnia and Herzegovina. When I talk about groups like Kamo Sutra or Hoće li ta promjena, this is definitely true because first protest that both of these groups organized was in support of Serbian students. So it was the first very protest. They actually had protests before these tram accidents or before Cetinje. They were directly influenced by this. They wanted to become politically active and so on. And they received a significant amount of support from Serbia because these people, especially in terms of like blockade is a big thing. I learned that blockade is a big thing. So you have to do blockades. If you don't do blockades, the protest is not serious. In Sarajevo, we had blockades this year. And when I spoke with Kadira, it was the most exciting day in her life. She was in every blockade, running around the town, seeing where she could get involved. So I didn't know about this before, but now I know. So you have to do blockades to have to make things interesting. If there's no blockade, things are not interesting. But okay, so we had some blockades in Sarajevo. I don't know, when we speak in terms of success, for me, this is not my topic, so I don't really deal with whether the protests were successful or not. I can say that we had 50 days of protest in Sarajevo and Podgorica, which already is something new, which is already something good. We had young people getting engaged politically, and they will learn much more than they will in their classes. In Bosnia, we have this class, Democracy and Human Rights, and I taught it at the high school level. People have no idea. People don't learn anything. It's considered one of those classes where you get easy grade and you don't do anything. So I think this political engagement taught them much more than the school would anyways. So that's why they are important. We had up to 10,000 people, which, I mean, it's not a huge number, but it's okay. It's okay. We should be happy, right? So, when we think about this protest, in terms of like this lived citizenship idea, I think that we should think about costs of political action, because all of these Southeast European societies can be categorized as small anonymous societies, which basically means that these are societies that are defined by high intensity of social relations. It means that every individual is embedded into networks of people to which they have to respond, right? So this means that when we study people who get politically involved, we have to understand their family circumstances, the friends they have, their social networks, their future prospects, the question of public exposure. All of them can lead many times to what I define as hyperbolized fear. Basically meaning that any kind of action you do can have serious political cost for your future. And every people have to think about this, not only at the moment when they engage in the protest, but at the end of protest itself. So many of the people will decide to retreat. And actually, this was also the reason why the protest in Sarajevo stopped at a certain point, because as I was told, one of the high school organizers started receiving comments from people around him how something may happen to him and his family. When I asked who was the one who was telling you this, he was like, no, they were just commenting. So it's like the fear that comes out of nowhere, but something can happen. And he is, of course, like everybody in these small societies when people know each other, was afraid. In terms of Montenegro, it's also even more exposed, because you have a capital of Podgorica that's 180,000 people big, right? So it's a very small place. So this is something that we have to think about when we think about political engagement. The another question is disillusionment, because every time you engage politically, you end up being depressed because nothing happens. In both of these cases, really, there were no major changes. In Sarajevo, the government gave a resignation and stayed in technical mandate. Up to this day, they are in technical mandate. The Sarajevo removed all trams from Sarajevo, from the city, because the idea was that that was one of the demands. So they removed all trams from Czechoslovakia, and now 5-10 days ago they are back. Because why are they back? Because they have great space for publicity, right? For advertisement, so it's money, right? I mean. It was already paid, right? So this is the idea. None of the, I don't know. So this is something that these people have to deal with in the aftermath of the protest. Many of the people in Sarajevo I spoke with defined that their action is apolitical, especially the youth, people from high schools. And I find it very interesting to think with this, because it's people who really want to change the system. They want to change what's happening in their country, but they don't want to engage with politics in any kind of way. And in a certain point of time, these people said that this is too political, we are getting out of this, because it becomes ugly, right? And it's also a strategy that people in power use also to kind of, you know, to make the protest, I mean, end in some kind of way. Okay, so I'm sorry if I don't have any kind of great conclusions, but this is like, this is it. This is what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Igor. And now, Dimitar, I give you the word.
Yeah, thank you, Ivana. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's great being here. It's wonderful coming back to CISEC every time. As I spent 5 years working at iASK before. Now, as someone is coming from North Macedonia, as someone who works with young people through civil society, I represent a think tank, an NGO that has twice the word Europe in its name. So I engage very much with young people exactly about European topics. I also, on the other side, I work as a researcher of democracy, populism, conspiracy theories in the past couple of years. So I want to begin with some observations. In debates that I participate in, we often ask whether young people are losing interest in democracy, whether they still trust institutions, whether they still feel connected to Europe. But when I look across Southeast Europe, I don't see a generation that has withdrawn from politics, as Igor shows as well in his presentation. I see the generation that is redefining politics. So perhaps the distrust, what Igor is saying, apolitical, I see it as a distrust of partisan politics or formal politics, but not necessarily politics per se. So they're becoming political in different ways. Perhaps nowhere is this more visible in our region of Southeast Europe. As we could see in Serbia, students and young citizens became a driving force behind some of the largest civic protests in recent memory. What began as outrage over tragedy and governance failures evolved into broader demands for accountability, transparency, institutional responsibility, and democratic standards. Recently in Albania, we saw that young people mobilized around issues ranging from corruption, environmental protection, to education, urban development. So they have challenged local authorities, organized campaigns, and demonstrated that civil engagement extends far beyond simple elections. And these examples show us something very important. Young people are not passive recipients of political decisions, but rather they are political actors and agents of change. So very often they're the first to recognize democratic decline and the first to react when institutions fail to respond to public concerns. And this should matter greatly for Europe. Because Europe today faces many challenges. We speak about strategic autonomy, defense, energy security, technological sovereignty, geopolitical competition, and all those issues are of course important. But there is another challenge that receives less attention, and this is the challenge of democratic resilience. So can the democratic societies generate enough trust, participation, and social cohesion to withstand polarization, disinformation, and growing political cynicism? Can democratic institutions remain legitimate in the eyes of younger generations? Can Europe continue to inspire participation rather than frustration, as we can see from the protests themselves? So these questions are particularly important in the Western Balkans. Let's use North Macedonia, my country, as an example. My generation grew up with the promise of European integration. Many of us were children when our countries began moving towards the European Union membership. We were told that reforms would bring us closer to Europe. So we learned foreign languages, we studied abroad, we embraced European values. We believed that progress would be rewarded. And today many of us are researchers, professionals, activists, parents, public servants, and yet our countries are still waiting. In North Macedonia, there are young people who were not even born when the country first started its European journey. They completed primary, secondary school, graduated universities, entered the labor market, started families, and in this entire period, the accession process has remained unresolved. This creates a very specific political reality. Young people have not necessarily become less European, but many have become less convinced that politics is capable of delivering Europe. And this distinction is crucial because support for Europe and trust in political processes are not the same thing. Just last week, we published an opinion poll that showed exactly this, that there is an overwhelming majority of people who support entering the European Union, but exactly the same percentage of people, it shows that there is a very big frustration with how the process itself is run. And when we compare this to Moldova and Ukraine with the Western Balkans, we can see a growing frustration about the process of European Union enlargement. So many young people continue to believe in the values that Europe represents. They believe in democracy, rule of law, human rights, openness, pluralism, accountability, but they're increasingly skeptical about whether political systems themselves can effectively translate these values into outcomes. And this is not only a challenge for candidate countries, it's also a challenge for the EU itself. If young people lose faith in democratic process, then Europe risks losing one of its greatest strengths, the belief that political participation can produce meaningful change. This is one of the reasons why my work over the past 2 years has increasingly focused on democratic resilience. At Eurothink, we worked extensively with students, young researchers, activists, journalists, and civil society organizations across North Macedonia, organized training programs, public debates, research initiatives, policy discussions related to European integration, democratic government, security, media literacy, and public policy. So what I consistently observe is not disengagement. The problem is not that young people do not care. The problem is that many young people do not see clear pathways through which their participation can influence decision making. So there is a disillusionment. Too often they feel consulted but not heard, invited but not empowered, and included symbolically but excluded substantially. And yet, whenever meaningful opportunities are created, young people respond. They contribute ideas, initiatives, participate in policy discussions, challenge institutions, create solutions. The challenge, therefore, is not how to motivate them, but how to create political systems capable of responding to their motivation. And which brings me to another area of my work. Over the past several years, I've researched conspiracy theories, disinformation, and democratic contestation in North Macedonia. And one of the central findings of my research is that conspiracy theories rarely emerge simply because people lack information. Very often, they emerge because people feel powerless. So when citizens believe that decisions are made elsewhere by actors they cannot influence, they become more susceptible to narratives that explain politics through hidden forces, secret agendas, and conspiracies. In other words, conspiracy theories often flourish where democracy agency declines. This is particularly relevant for young people. They live in highly fragmented information environments. They encounter misinformation, disinformation, manipulative narratives every day. They're exposed to actors who seek to convince them that democracy is fake, institutions are corrupt beyond repair, and participation is meaningless. There is also a positive side to this story. The same digital environment that spreads conspiracy theories can also facilitate democratic mobilization, as we can see. The same digital environment that spreads conspiracy theories the same platforms that spread disinformation can help organize civic action. The same technologies that polarize society can also connect citizens across borders. So technology itself is not the determining factor, but rather it's human agency. Increasingly, that agency belongs to younger generations. This is why I believe youth participation should not be treated as a secondary issue. It should be understood as a strategic issue for Europe's future. When European leaders discuss strategic autonomy, they often focus on military capabilities, energy independence, critical infrastructure, or technological development. And of course, these are very essential issues. But strategic autonomy also requires democratic legitimacy. A Europe that is militarily stronger, but politically fragmented, will remain vulnerable. A Europe that invests in defense, but neglects democratic trust, will struggle to maintain cohesion. A Europe that seeks geopolitical influence while losing the confidence of its own citizens cannot fully succeed. So the future of Europe therefore depends not only on institutions and politics, it depends on whether citizens feel ownership of the European project. And young people are central to that effort. In many ways, they're already building Europe from below through Erasmus exchanges, universities, civil society networks, cultural cooperation, research partnerships, activism, digital communities that transcend national borders. Many young people in the Western Balkans already lived within a European social and political space, even if formal accession remains incomplete. And this reality should give us a reason for optimism. Because despite political frustration, despite disinformation, polarization, despite slow enlargement process, young people continue to engage. They continue to organize, to challenge authority, to demand accountability. And they continue to believe that democratic participation matters. So perhaps the question facing Europe is not whether young people still care about democracy, as the evidence from Serbia, Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and many other countries suggest that they do. The real question is whether our institutions are capable of responding to that democratic energy. Can they create meaningful opportunities for participation? Can they translate civic engagement into policy outcomes? Can they restore trust in democratic processes? And can they demonstrate that democracy still delivers? Because ultimately, Europe's future will not be determined only by treaties, governments, or institutions. It will be determined by whether a new generation believes that democratic engagement remains worth the effort. Looking across Southeast Europe today, I remain optimistic. Not because our democracies are without problems, but because young people continue to fight for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dimitar. Now I would like to give the floor to Dženita.
Thank you. Is it working? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. It's always good to be back in Kosek. I think this is my 5th time here. And people who have heard me before, they know that I can talk about institutions and the economy. So when I was invited to participate in this panel, I was thinking, how can I contribute? Because it is not really my field. But the statistician in me started thinking, I was starting looking through data. And to my surprise, what I realized is that when we talk about young people leaving, about migration, it is always about institutions and the economy. So here we are. Why do young people leave? Institutions, economy, and migration in the Western Balkans. So why does this matter? First, the Western Balkan region has a lot to offer. It has a lot of benefits. For example, the region has a reasonably, high growth rate, higher than the EU average. Then it has educated the labor force. The countries are candidates for EU membership. Geographically, it's close to the EU. It's in its neighborhood. So what is the problem? The problem is that there is no development, that the unemployment rate is high, especially among young people. The region cannot even seize the advantage of backwardness. It cannot attract foreign direct investment. The corruption level is really high. So who is to blame here? Extractive, inefficient institutions. Young people, they want to leave because of these problems, because of economic insecurity and because of low institutional trust. So what is the key question? The key question is, why does dissatisfaction produce migration rather than political engagement of young people? For this particular research, I focused on 2 data sets. I have to just emphasize that I did not collect the data myself. The first one is FES Youth Study 2024, and the second one, Balkan Barometer 2025. The presentation is based on the Balkan Barometer. It has to be emphasized that these 2 data sets complement each other. So what do they show? The data show that migration aspirations in the Western Balkan are really high. On average, 67% of people would be leaving to leave. Now, one of the limitations of the study is that it is not really clear whether people would just go abroad for a few years to gain experience, to just see how it is living abroad, or would they move permanently? Surprisingly, the lowest rate is in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You would think that we would like to leave because of the political situation and everything, but no, it's the lowest rate, 56.5%. The highest rate is in North Macedonia and Serbia. So the conclusion is that migration aspirations are high throughout the region. Why young people tend to leave more? So, as I said, 67%. The overall population, the average is 52%. So people who would like to leave. This is aged 18 to 60 plus. Why are young people so keen on leaving? The first thing is greater mobility. So it's not just that if they leave, they could travel. It's that they also are not constrained by different factors. For example, maybe they still don't have children. Their parents are still relatively young. They don't need help. So at this stage of their life, they can move. Second is that they have stronger expectations about their future. They think they can achieve more abroad, and they are dissatisfied with future prospects in their own country. So they are more likely to leave compared to the entire population. Also, trust in institutions is low. It's the lowest among young people, so aged 18 to 29, compared to the entire population. It's not surprisingly, you shouldn't be surprised to hear that trust is the highest among people, among people in the group age 60 plus. So the data here is, so the scale is 1 to 4, trust in government, 2.07, trust in political parties is even lower, 1.79. So what I also wanted to do is I wanted, as I said, I'm a statistician, so I wanted to just perform statistical analysis using these data. So can statistics explain why young people leave? So the dependent variable here is migration intentions, and dependent variable economic insecurity, so unemployment concerns, pressure with limited work opportunities, institutional distrust, as I said, low trust in government, political parties, and high corruption concerns, and political dissatisfaction. So young people are underrepresented, but also there is a low rate of political participation among young people and low political efficacy. The first thing that I did was a correlation analysis. So basically it's the relationship between migration intentions and each of these variables respectively. The results were consistent that the correlation is really low. Which means that no single factor on its own can explain why people leave. So this was the first step. The second step was regression analysis. Here it's not just whether the relationship is positive, how strong it is, it's what the effect is. Again, the results are consistent with the correlation analysis that no single factor explains migration intentions. What are the results? The trust in political parties has the strongest relationship with migration intentions. Political dissatisfaction is also associated with migration. On the other hand, economic perception alone explains little variations. So the conclusion is that we cannot again look at these factors individually, whether they alone explain willingness to migrate, but it's a whole set of factors. Now, not just to constrain ourselves with the statistical analysis, there is also political economy interpretation, and again, economic insecurity, high unemployment rate, limited opportunities to work, they lead to institutional distrust. Low trust in government, political parties, which leads to political disengagement, why young people are not engaged in politics, and all these factors actually contribute to them wanting to leave. For them, this is the best option. So just in short, why young people exit instead of raising their voice, instead of participating. For them, it is not only an economic strategy, but it is also a response to institutional dissatisfaction and institutional limitations. As I said, this study is preliminary. I only started working on it. Maybe the results will be a little bit different when other variables are also taken into consideration. But okay, at this early stage, I think we also showed something that we have to take into consideration all the factors, so not one single factor can explain migration intentions. Also, I don't know how much you know about statistics in econometrics, but when we analyze data, we only focus on the relationship between different variables. We do not talk about causation. So yes, these factors, these three factors that I took into consideration, they can explain why young people leave, but we cannot say that they are the cause of migration. Weak correlation, as I said, no single factor can explain. For example, the economic uncertainty is not even statistically significant variable. We cannot say that it doesn't affect, but we do not have enough evidence to conclude that it has an effect on migration intentions. So this is just warning that these results can be must be interpreted with caution and in context. So my presentation is a little bit shorter, but the main takeaway is that high migration aspiration among young people in the Western Balkans are linked to both economic insecurity and institutional distrust. As we saw, 67% of young people are willing to leave the region. Trust in institutions is extremely low, and economic and institutional factors, they reinforce one another. They do not work separately. We cannot take them into consideration separately. And so as this as a consequence, migration may appear more realistic for young people to change their future, to have a prospect in their future, than to politically engage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dženita. And now I would like to give the word to Péter.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor, and also thank you very much for including this very important topic in this conference, because I think it is impossible to talk about the future without the topic of the youth, because we are the future, and I think the youth will shape and are shaping the world today. My name is Péter. I am the senior UN youth delegate of Hungary. My job is basically to create a bridge between the Hungarian youth and the decision makers here in Hungary, and also in the international sphere in the United Nations. I travel sometimes to New York, to the UN headquarters, and there I can speak about the Hungarian youth, and I can represent their problems, their ideas, and what is going on in Hungary. So first I would like to start, and I will talk about youth participation and youth advocacy and how does it work. I want to be very clear that I'm not a researcher, so that's not my job. I'm still a student, but I meet with a lot of young people here in Hungary. I travel, I go to villages, I go to the capital and travel high schools, universities, and I talk with people. That's my job. I meet around a couple of hundreds of young individuals every single month, which is a privilege, and it's, I think, very, very interesting to see the different problems that they face. But one of the most important topics, what I like to talk about, is youth participation. How can youth shape the decision-making process, for example? But first, let's speak about the reality from today. So we can see that basically 50% of the world's total population is under the age of 30. Basically, every second person in the world considers as a young individual. But if you look at the decision-making bodies, we can see that less than 2% of members of parliaments are under the age of 30. And if you look at the highest decision-making bodies in governments, 65% of upper houses have no one under the age of 30, which, you know, we can say that, of course, young people don't have the experience and etc. But we can see that, you know, being young today means totally different what it meant to be young 50 years ago. I mean, the world is changing on a pace we've never seen before. I mean, 20 years ago, we did not have a smartphone. Now, basically, everybody owns one. It's not even a luxury item in Europe. Or we can look at AI. 4 or 5 years ago, we thought artificial intelligence was something out of a science fiction movie. Right now, like 50% of Gen Z uses it on a daily basis. And we can see that it's really shaping how we live, and that's why we are facing new problems, new challenges every single day. And that's why we really have to rethink how can the young generations participate in the decision-making process and in a working democracy. So that's why I think this is a very good title of the conference, Europe Choice, because it's not a question of can youth shape Europe, because we are already doing us. It's a question of will Europe let us shape the future. So what's going on in Hungary currently? I think we're living in a very big momentum right now. In April, there was an election, and 16 years of of Orban's government changed to a new government, and they won by a landslide. Basically, they got like 144 mandates out of 199 mandates, which was a very, very big win for them. And also the turnouts were very high. 79% of people voted, which was the highest since 1990. And also we can see that the young generation was a decisive factor. Around 4-1 voted for the new TISA government and not the Fidesz government. So we can see that this is not an apathetic generation. We could see even in the campaign, young people were going door to door, and there were very big activity from them in the online sphere as well. And the young generations did show up and try to contribute to this political change, which really proves that this generation can move politics if they want. And also we can see a trend in EU with youth they don't want to participate in these political processes. So non-participation youth decreased from 43% to 30% from 2019 to 2024. So we can really see that there is something going on right now. There is a change in this generation, and we can see that even before April in Hungary, we had quite some protests going on, which was organized by the youth. But it's not just only Hungary. We can see in Europe, many countries prove that youth are reshaping politics. We could see Serbia after the Novi Sad canopy fall down and 16 people died. We could see one of the biggest protests in the European sphere. We could see like more than 300,000 young individuals went to the street and protested. And which was very interesting that young people come up with new ideas as well, because this movement was basically leaderless. It was organized digitally, and it was a very horizontal movement, which was something very new, and we did not see that very often before that. And also we could see EU-wide, the civic action among young individuals grew from 49%, no, it is 49%, which is a great development, and we can see more people are going and voting in elections, which is very good. And I think in Hungary as well, we could see a positive movement from the institutional level as well, since the new government came into office, which is like 1 month or 1.5 months ago. So everything is very new, but the Ministry of Education and Child Affairs created this so-called Children and Youth Participation Group, which was something very new, and some Western European countries already have some sort of or similar concept, but it's a very nice thing to see that the new minister actually opens up to the young generations and try to involve them. I mean, we will see how it ends up and how effective will it be, but it is a very nice change, and it's moving into the right direction. Of course, we would want to see some faster development, but I'm very grateful for these new opportunities. We can see in EU there was a youth dialogue which collected more than the opinions of more than 130,000 young individuals over the 5 years. There is youth check on new EU policy. There is the President's Youth Advisory Board, and if you look at the international sphere, we can see that, for example, in the UN in 2024, every single member state voted for the Pact for the Future, which is one of the most important documents of youth advocacy and youth participation. And there, every single country said that it should, beyond consultation, they should move to shared decision making. And I think that should be the goal, is not just to ask the youth, but also involve them in the decision making processes, because surveys are not real youth participation, and that's a very important thing. And sometimes you can see that the decision makers are just involving the youth just to show that the young people are here and they are inviting them and trying to talk with this organization, but that's not real participation. And I think in a well-working democracy, we really need that. So I'm very grateful for these developments, and we can see that slowly the decision makers are trying to involve us better, and we have to be grateful for that. So that's a good thing, but we should really keep the pace going, and also to see more and more young individuals getting into these rooms is very good, because I'm in a very privileged position. When I go to the UN or even in Hungary, I had the privilege to meet with many decision makers, but most people don't, and even most representatives don't. I mean, they don't really talk to the leaders of youth organizations and etc. So I'm in a very privileged position, but I really want to change this, and I'm lobbying for these good causes, so there will be a change. But I wanted to talk about quickly, because I don't have a lot of time, about the missing half, because I see that the door is half open right now, but there is the other half, which is not the responsibility of the institutions, because they are doing their job. I know that bureaucracies can work very slow, but there are some good steps, I think. But the other half is about the youth. Like these processes only work if the young generations believe that they do work. But if we don't believe and we don't respect these institutions and these democratic processes, then it's just not going to work in the long term. And it's a very important question. And I think sometimes we as young people, we can always complain and say that these things not working well and etc. But it's very rare that we look, in the mirror and say that, are we doing the best we can? Are we creating the best developments we can do? And I think no, we can really see. And I talk with a lot of student council presidents and when I go to organizations, a lot of youth leaders, and they say that most of the times, that's the first problem is, of course, for example, in a high school, the teachers, they don't respect student councils. They don't give any rights to them, and they don't really involve in any sort of decision making. But the other problem is that their classmates, they don't care about these institutions. They don't care about the student council. They don't care about the election in the schools. They don't care about these things. And it's very hard to actually advocate for the right cause when our peers are not respecting us. And it's another very important question. How can we create a change basically in this process? Because I think it's not just top down, it's also bottom up, and we also have to look out for each other. And that's why we really have to create a culture where actually the young individuals respect these institutions. We really have to create a culture where they socialize in systems where they believe their vote counts, actually. And if they have a problem, they can turn to their own representatives. And even if it's just a student council, that's where they socialize. And that's where they have their first experiences with these democratic processes. If they don't respect it then, it's very hard to respect when they grow up and then when they become 18 and they can vote in a real election. So that's why it is extremely important to actually work on creating a culture where these processes are respected. And also to create a culture where political work is not something to be ashamed of. In Hungary, we really experienced that if somebody works for a political party, that they are basically making fun of, and it's not a respected work. But when I was in DC, in the US, I saw that I visited many representatives and senators' offices, and I saw that in the cabinets of these politicians, the average age was like 25 or 26 years old. And these are not people who are just making posts and doing marketing for these politicians. They are the ones who are taking the economic segment or the transportation and infrastructure. They are really doing professional work for these politicians, and they are young people, and the average age was 25, 26 years old. And in Europe, it's very hard to even consider to see that many young people, their goal is to go and work for a politician, because it have a sort of stigma on this work, and we really have to change this and also motivate people to try to go into politics, even in a young age. We can see that a positive change as well in the Europe or in our parliament currently. There are around 5 or 6 members who are under the age of 30, and the youngest one is 21 years old. Currently in the Hungarian parliament, which is a nice change to see. But even in local politics, we really have to create a culture and some sort of motivation for people to try to participate, not just through representative or advocative processes, but also in elections. And it's a good thing to see. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the generation gap, because it's very important to emphasize that the current decision makers, or at least most of them, they don't understand us. I talked with a lot of state secretaries and deputy state secretaries who are doing the very specific political work, and they just don't really understand how young generation works. Of course, they know some memes and they try to be very young and try to have some jokes, and they are try to create some TikTok videos to talk with the youth, but that's not real understandment. They don't really understand us, they don't get us, and it's a very big issue because there's a huge gap between the generation of the decision makers and the generation of the youth. And that's why it's extremely important to also educate them, because decision makers can only make decisions and systems if they understand us. And for example, the perfect, I think one of the best example of this is, for example, this paradox, which I always like to share with the students I meet as well, is if you look at statistics, currently in 2026, it's basically one of the best time to live in human history. I mean, we have the most opportunity, we as a generation, we are the most educated generation. Today is basically the least poverty all around, the least hunger, etc. We can see that from a macro level, these statistics shows that it's very good thing to live, and we always get it from our grandparents that back in their day it was so much harder to be a young individual. But I don't agree with this, actually. Of course, some things were harder then, for example, the World War. I mean, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but today young people are basically the unhappiest generation. We have the most mental illness, and also there is this cognitive decrease. I mean, our cognitive capabilities decrease from our compared to our parents, which is due to digital addictions, basically. And we can see that we are facing challenges that were never seen before, and that's why it's very important to make the decision makers understand that they have to look at the youth in a different way. And to close, I really wanted to just say that young people, I think they could be an asset to the decision makers, because we can see that a 20-something young individual can be an expert in something. That's something new. We can see a lot of successful entrepreneurs who started their journey in university or even a high school. There are a lot of young politicians or creators, influencers who could actually but they are actually shaping the world currently. A lot of the technology we see today that were created by young individuals, and society and the market already sees it, and I think democracy needs to catch up to this and also involve young people in decision-making processes, because the market already somehow respects it, and we always like to see, young entrepreneurs in front of the magazines and etc. But somehow it's not in the politician world yet. And just one last thing to say, that I believe that we have to sit at the most of the decision-making tables. We have to be in that room and not just as a commenter. We have to really take part of these processes. But also, I don't agree with some of the young delegates, even in the UN or EU, when they say that we have to be at every table. I don't agree with that. That's my own personal opinion. Of course, there are some topics which requires very high level of expertise, but most of the tables we can be there and we can be constructive and we can contribute to it. So that's why it's very important. And basically, this conference is called Europe's Choice, but this is the choice as a young person sees it. Europe can keep making its decision about my generation, or it can start making decisions with us. And I think that's the goal, and that's what we should work towards. Thank you.
Thank you very much for adding Hungary to the conversation. Wonderful. And before we continue, I just wanted to say that our colleague Branislav is unfortunately leaving in a few minutes from now, and he also contributed to the book that Jody is editing. So I wanted to say publicly goodbye, and we will miss you.
Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful time for me, 4 months here. Yes, and I have to say this really gives me hope, this panel in general, but I have to say your words are extremely important. Students, in Serbia, as we say, students are winning. As you can see, also on my laptop here, students win. I think this is extremely important because it is about you more than, you know, our parents potentially and grandparents. It is really down to you to shape the future, what you want for you in the best possible way, bearing in mind the importance of institutions, of certain values, and so on. So thank you very much for your great contribution, but to all colleagues, really thank you very much for being so nice to me over the past couple of months, and I wish you all the very best, and I hope to be back at some point to Kőszeg. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we can continue with Erina. Thank you so much for coming also for the first time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivana, and thank you everyone for being here, and for the panelists that shared their thoughts and their experience that I see is very similar experience with us in the region for young people, also specifically with our neighbors from North Macedonia. We are in the same boat, as so to say. A little background from me. For the last 3 years, I come from a legal background. For the last 3 years, I have been involved in projects regarding European integration. So very quickly, I will give a snapshot of Albania's EU accession process. Albania's relationship with the EU has been a long political and social process. We applied for the first time for the membership in 2009. The candidate status was granted in 2014, and officially the negotiating process began in 2022 with the first intergovernmental conference taking place in July of that same year. Since 2022, then the process has been at full speed ahead. If you know about the organization, is organized in 6 thematic clusters, with cluster 1, the fundamentals being about the rule of law, the functioning of democratic states, the judiciary, security, all the most important things. This is a cluster and chapters that open first and close last, and just this past, the latest development for this past month has been that we have gotten a positive feedback on interim benchmarks, and are now granted the closing benchmarks for cluster 1, but of course there is a lot of work to do. And we have an ambition from the government, we have an ambitious deadline, be in Europe by 2030. And drawing from this contrast, we have this very technical process, legislative, legal alignment process taking place. But for the Albanian citizens and for the Albanian youth, while Europe still represents a horizon of opportunity, a space for study, for mobility, for rights and democratic belonging, it still seems a little bit distant, a little bit abstract, a little bit further away and slower for them. This comes because, as I said, this process with the speed that it's going, that is progressing, it's still staying in a very technical level. And for those of us who have been involved to some extent with research or supporting the government or civil society work, we want to bring this process closer to the people, to the lives of the citizens that this process is meant to serve. We want to see the societal change, and while the government may make a promise that by 2030 we will be in EU, the process goes beyond that, so we need to bring people also inside and get them involved in this process to hear their voices. And so I want to talk a little bit about the youth sentiment in Albania with regards to European integration and EU, how they view the Union. While the process has really been long and there is some frustration, I believe we still have the highest sentiment, the pro-European Union sentiment in the region. Maybe this comes because for Albanian youth, Europe is still a promise. But maybe it's the progress that we're seeing. Maybe it's the geopolitical tension and situation in the country, in the region as well. I'm going to go very shortly over some data. They are a little bit outdated to some extent. It's 24, 25. How does Albanian youth feel about the EU? The broader public picture shows a strong support. There is a barometer that from RCC that shows a support of 77% of respondents in Albania supporting and saying good things about European integration. Because personally, for them, it means they link it with economic prosperity and freedom to study and work in the EU. And now, particularly this last thing for me is a concern, and is a concern that our whole region is experiencing. Because for young people, EU integration is not experienced through clusters, chapters, legal alignment, institutional changes, rather than questions about their daily life. Are the institutions more accountable? Do we have more equal opportunities? Do we have an improved education and employment opportunities? And most importantly, can we imagine and can we create a life here at home in our own country? So this freedom to study and work in the EU, while it's a nice prospect, there is still the risk that there will be a substantial migration and brain drain from Albania once we are in the EU. We already are seeing that, so that is very concerning for us. Although Albania, in the framework of European integration, has made several changes to the framework of how they organize and support youth, there is a slight decline in the unemployment rate. We have implemented the youth guarantee scheme that will be rolled out until 2030, if I'm not mistaken. There is an action plan. So there are positive changes, but the challenge remains still much larger. With regards to participation of Albanian youth in public life, I will call it public life because apparently, as it is in North Macedonia, as it is, as Igor also stated, calling it political life, being into politics, it's considered for some reason big bad wolf that disincentivates, discourages people, especially young people, participating in public dialogue. So I will call it public life and civic engagement. With regards to this, surveys shows that young Albanians are not members of parties, like a large percentage, or activists in political parties, yet they do believe that the young people's voice must be heard. They must be included, but they still have a sort of distrust on the traditional ways of participation. So, and we see the same scenario in digital spaces. So, participation of young people nowadays is moving more toward digital spaces, issue-based activism, volunteer work. It's becoming a more informal, more digital as well. But there is a survey in Albania from 2025 that shows that while young people are staying informed through social media, through digital platforms, the engagement is actually to 20%, up to 20%. So we do want to see the change. The young people want to get involved, and I guess the question is not whether Albanian youth is engaged or disengaged, but it should be more whether what are the public institutions, how is the current administration going to support young people's engagement in public life? This is also where a dimension where Albanian citizens, Albanian young people meet with the European integration, because what young people, and I will talk a little bit later what young people in Albania are protesting today, they care. I say we because I consider myself one of them, I'm a young person, about education, employment, corruption, mobility, equality, environmental protection. So building a future at home in a state that is functioning well, in a rule of law state. And this is what European integration is about and has been about for us. So this is the change that we want to see. So for me, moving beyond disillusionment is moving beyond symbolic participation and to create space where young people are invited to speak, where their input is taken seriously, it's followed up and connected actually reflected in policy choices. We refer to the young generations as the leader of tomorrow, the voices of the future, and that is true, but in fact it should be reflected with more involvement in the leading of today. Reflecting very shortly on the ongoing protests happening in Albania, they are very funnily dubbed the Flamingo Revolution, from the originating story where the protest started from. Very shortly, I will say this, that the protest started sometime in the late May because of a project. There might be a project, there might not be a project. I will not get into the details of it. Of the luxury development in a protected area in Pišpora of Josanarta in the southern of Albania. And it started from that, from the local communities protesting this, and then it gained so much traction, and it has become larger than that. And now it has shifted towards a reaction to how decisions are made in Albania. Who benefits from these decisions, whether citizens feel protected by or trust on the institutions that are supposed to represent them. If I can take one takeaway from this protest, they tell us that something very important that is happening in Albania. It shows that many citizens, many young people are no longer willing to remain passive when public goods are concerned, local livelihoods are concerned, where democratic accountability is at stake. It's very energizing, the new generation. They are more direct in claiming their rights, more willing to organize, demanding for transparency and open political dialogue. So the question remains, as it has been said during this whole panel, how does this engagement of young people become change, brings actual change? How do these protests that are happening now in Albania and in other countries of the region, these digital campaigns go from expression to actual influence? And this is actually a question that I hope that the current government in Albania, the opposition, civil society, youth structures, and everybody reflects upon in these decisive moments. We can bring and evolve the youth, because we have their intention. Thank you.